So Rhode Island reacts to some really bad vandalism at the Islamic School of Rhode Island, and we'll talk about it tonight. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York. Thank you for joining us. The Reverend Donald Anderson, who is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island State Council of Churches, is my guest. Don comes back to talk about how the clergy came together with public officials ranging all the way up to the FBI and U.S. Attorney yesterday reacting to this vandalism at this school, thusly named. And it's outrageous. But there's some interesting implications and ways to think about it. And we'll talk with the Reverend about that as we move along in the program. But first, let us go to the rundown and see what we've got tonight. Oh, by the way, didn't it feel like just a beautiful day today? I mean, I felt like swimming. It almost reached 30. Weather on the brain. Judge says, hold on there, baby. That's about immigration, deportation, and the president's plan. On hold. We'll talk about it. Speaking of the snow and the weather, you got to be careful out there. Some pretty serious concerns and then some kind of ridiculous ones. The governor continues to have more changes in her administration, some becoming kind of provocative, I think. And we've got some, struggling economy here, some regulations the governor is adding to subtract the regulations, if that makes any sense. It's Lent. Today is Ash Wednesday, and of course, we'd like to hear what you think on your state of mind. So let us dig in here. Yeah, the judge says, hold on. Federal judge in Texas allows 26 states to get back in the game here on this immigration executive order that the president issued. The headline reads as such from the New York Post. We'd like to spread around our headlines a little bit. CBS kind of lays out the story for you right here.
It would have been today that the Department of Homeland Security began accepting applications for temporary legal status from undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children.
I disagree with the Texas judge's ruling, and the Justice Department will appeal.
But the ruling by Texas federal judge Andrew Hanen Monday blocks President Obama's executive action on immigration. Judge Hanen's ruling gives 26 states time to sue the administration to stop the president's action. In his 123-page ruling, the judge said the president had overreached and that the policy would have burdened states with, quote, several $1 million in mandatory costs.
It's always interesting that when a judge makes kind of a political judicial decision that rolls with conservative members of Congress, that some people say, oh my gosh, that's overstepping one's bounds. But a judge has the right to review the case, the complaints, and he also could be overturned any minute now because a single federal judge will have his decision reviewed by the appellate court. And there's a better chance that the Obama administration could see some redress in the appellate court. I think the great thing about the Constitution is that a big guy like the President of the United States can say, we're doing this, and a single judge in a single district in the middle of Texas somewhere can say, hold on, based on the complaint. This is a beautiful system. You should celebrate it. Next item. Be careful, really, huh? Are you kidding me? In Smithfield, did you see this? This poor woman falls through the roof while clearing the snow. Now, we're all freaking out about the roofs. In fact, I borrowed my buddy's roof rake yesterday before I went to work. I'm up there. I mean, you want to talk about getting a sweat. I am up there. I was just trying to get it, shake it loose. And now we've got some rain with snow coming this weekend, and everyone's worried about that. But, these flat roofs really need to be taken care of, and God bless her. I guess she stepped where there's a skylight, according to the fire chief in Smithfield.
There's no way of knowing where those skylights are. I mean, we have a photo that shows it, from the top, and we but to actually locate them now, you'd have to go up there and walk around and go with a stick to locate them.
Yeah, fire chief, superintendent, same thing, right? In Smithfield, small town, same hat, no. She's okay. Head and neck injuries, nothing life-threatening, thank God. It's just too much. And then under the same theme of please, be careful out there. The mayor of Boston kind of rolling in with a little bit of nanny state. Listen, you got to cut these guys a break, and these gals, these politicians, these elected officials, whose legacy rises and falls on snow removal, on weather and crisis leadership. But I don't know who I get a bigger kick out of. Deadpan Marty Walsh talking about jumping out of windows, or his signer, who's much more animated.
Something going around on Twitter where people are jumping out windows into snowbanks. First of all, it's a foolish thing to do, and you could kill yourself. So I'm asking people to stop the nonsense right now when it comes. These are adults jumping out windows, and they seem like it was a fun thing to do, but you have no idea what's happening. And this isn't Loon Mountain. This is the city of Boston where we're trying to remove snow off the street. It becomes very dangerous, and the last thing we want to do is have to report to an emergency call where somebody jumped out the window because they thought it was a funny thing to do.
So the mayor is obviously exhausted. Yeah, listen, you cannot regulate people's behavior. Now, he's not threatening prosecution. He's just offering commentary. He has every right to do that. He's got a big project on his hands here, but if you're stupid enough to jump out of a window into an ice mound that could, cut your throat because the ice is in there, whatever, well, natural process of nature. Is that redundant? You know what I'm talking about. Of course, public response, taxpayer money's got to be used to save you, you knucklehead, so don't do that. Don't do that. I do get a kick out of the signers, by the way. They are a necessary service. My daughter actually is learning this part of the process of sign language, and it is fun to see the animation along with the signing. Public officials might take note of the energy that signers bring. It would help their message a little bit. Anyway, I'm just as punchy. Don't be jumping out of windows. More changes at the Raimondo administration. Headline. Listen, I'm in no position to be able to tell you about the ultimate competence of the DOT director, Michael Lewis, but I will say this. He has been an honest broker with the media and the public. He has stood for things and argued items such as tolls for the Secundit River Bridge. He and I disagreed vehemently on that. But he was always there to respond to your questions, to your queries, to your debate, to your complaints, all of that. And so I think from that end of public service, he will be sorely missed. Peter Alviti, who started under Traff, the famous Mayor Traff in Cranston, and now works with Traff, I guess, at the Laborers International Union, is the replacement. This might be a very interesting appointment. Don't know enough, got to keep an open mind. We'll invite him here and see what he has to say. In the meantime, Rosemary Gillooly, the other headline there, she's a tough one to replace. She's got all the nuts and bolts of town finance. She's got it all in the back of her hand and in the recesses of her mind and computer. She leaves with a pension of near $120,000. So she picks up a little part-time work. She'll make as much as she was making and have a very well-earned retirement. She will be missed, no doubt. Rhode Island economy is lagging behind the rest of the country, even though we're improving slightly for ourselves in context. The Providence Journal shows it. The economy grows despite weakness. We're just not keeping up with the Joneses, and one of the problems that the business community always talks about is the business climate. And so the governor has made some executive orders here. And in essence, what this does, as you can see her signing this executive order yesterday, in essence what this does is kind of make the bureaucracy report to the bureaucracy about what the bureaucracy is trying to stick on the business community. In other words, before they set up any new rules, they got to pass it to the administration for its review. Okay, I got a better idea, Gov, not for nothing. Stop brainstorming all the new rules. Just a thought. 'Tis Ash Wednesday. Yes. 40 days. As I was at Mass this morning, I do my best to stay focused spiritually. But all I could think about at Mass this morning was, okay, Lord, we got 40 days here. I'm hoping you're rising from green grass and not 45 or 10 or 50 inches of snow. I asked the people, on the radio. Dan York, weekdays noon to 3 on WPRO, what their projection was. Will it be grass or will it be snow by Easter? It's an early season. Split vote. Not everybody was convinced that it'll be spring when we celebrate the resurrection. Maybe we'll ask the Reverend about that. He seems to know a lot about a lot of things. State of mind. Oh, you tell me. Could you answer that question? That is your poll question. Please respond to me at 228-1886. Email me at stateofmind@myritv.com. And tweet and Facebook post at Dan York Show. Don't forget the E. What do you think? 50-50. But he will be risen, and there will be joy. All right. Not so much joy in West Warwick. We'll talk about it next. Yeah, this isn't good. I mean, you look at this headline and you think, oh, come on, man, really? We got enough aggravation throughout the world with relationships between the Islamic community and everybody else. Please. But, you cannot, there's not much you can do about the fringe behavior that's out there. To round out the story a little bit, Steve Nielsen put this together.
So offensive, we can only show you certain words that were spray painted onto the pre-K through 8th grade Islamic School of Rhode Island Saturday night. The school's principal said the school will continue to reach out to the community, but also increase safety, considering adding a school officer.
My presence here today.
The FBI and U.S. Attorney Peter Nerona came. They're trying to track down the person responsible who was caught on surveillance camera.
Is there any reason at this point to believe this could turn into violence, or does this look like just one act at this point?
At this point, we're looking at it as solely a civil rights investigation.
I don't have any concerns that when the kids come back to school next week, they'll be safe.
The second to latter person there from the FBI and, of course, U.S. Attorney Peter Nerona. Reverend Donald Anderson was at that event yesterday with the Council of Churches, Standing United. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Gut check on what you saw?
Yeah, well, first of all, the graffiti was vile. I mean, vile in a really, really horrible way. I think the other concern for us is, and I know U.S. Attorney Nerona talked about safety, and I think what he's talking about is physical safety, and I have every reason to believe that his assessment is probably right. But there's also this sense of psychological safety, of children coming and how a child interprets these things. A couple of years ago when we had that kind of crazy minister down in Florida who wanted to burn the Quran, we did an event like this to show solidarity. And after that event, a couple said to me, we have two sons, 6 and 8, and the 6-year-old had come to them that morning, and even though they'd done everything they could to protect him from the news about this event, and they hadn't talked about it at dinner and those kinds of things, he said, Mom, I'm kind of afraid to go to school today because I'm afraid kids are going to be after me because I'm a Muslim. So, when I talk about safety, I'm talking as much about that psychological safety as I am about physical safety.
No, I agree. Not to double down on your story, but I think I told you on the radio yesterday, I've got a friend who's a renowned medical guy who's Muslim, and his son, teenage son, after 9/11, had a horrible time, just a horrible time. He came to his father at one point and said, "Hey, Dad, we're Americans. Why don't we just jump over? Let's call this thing a Christian thing." But you can't do anything about his complexion. You can't do anything about his last name. And that is the quandary that I think a lot of American Muslims and worldwide Muslims are dealing with right now. So I think it's wholly appropriate for the Council of the Churches to come together and say something about it. I just hope that we haven't hyperbolize the conversation by drawing so much attention to it, right?
Well, I think that what we need to do is hopefully this is an ongoing conversation, and we do things to try and make this an ongoing conversation, not just when there are incidents like this. For example, several years ago, Imam Fareed Ansari, who is the president of the Council for Muslim Advancement, knew someone in D.C. that had a traveling exhibit on the history of Islam in America. And so we were able to get a grant at the Council of Churches, and we brought this exhibit here and set it up in a conservative synagogue. And for 3 nights and days, students went through and other people came through. We had a program each night to just kind of foster this ongoing dialogue to help people understand, I'm a Baptist. I've got to be honest with you. There are some Baptists that embarrass me about the way they deal with certain things in life. There's a crazy group out in Kansas that pickets the funerals of soldiers, and you know, I'm embarrassed by those people calling themselves Baptists. So every faith tradition, you know, has people that embarrass themselves. But I think that one of the things we need to help people understand is that the Muslims who live here in Rhode Island, and I'm not saying there, you know, there may be some exceptions, but all the Muslims I know that live here in Rhode Island are peaceable, caring people who want what you and I want. We want to raise our kids. We want to live in a peaceful society. We want to be able to express our ideas freely, and that's what they're looking for.
And it's interesting. I have no quarrel with that. I'm sure you're probably correct. And it actually is fascinating that, I don't know if it's always been the case, probably has, but we draw more attention to it now that everyone's getting their 15 minutes of fame, that there's more splinter identification out of categorized groups, whether they be political, religious, secular, of any kind. Every core identifiable human gathering seems to have splinters now.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And part of this may be that with the internet and with the ability to, you know, get people's attention and the way things travel so quickly with the social media and those kinds of things, maybe that's fostered that. I don't know. But I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right that there are people, and it seems like if I can say something crazier than the guy before me, right, I'm going to get some sort of time.
I often wonder whether it's, you know, we talked about this on the air from time to time, whether social media is actually put more light on existing human behavior, or whether human behavior has adjusted to the opportunity to sound off. My guess is the latter.
Yeah, well, I think there might be a little bit of both, but there wasn't a medium for other people to do this. I mean, right now, I mean, anybody can get a Facebook page, and bang, you're up and running, you know, and I mean, even I can understand how to set up a Facebook page, and I'm pretty technically illiterate, right? So if I can do it, just about anybody
You look
can.
actually very proud about it.
Well, I'm an old guy,
No,
you know.
hey, listen, believe me, I relate to it. You know,
So.
yeah. If I get word to work, I think it's really exciting. When we come back, some of the questions that the public does raise from time to time, though, when these incidents occur. Stay with us.
To the person who did this, I want to say this to him or to her, that we have nothing but prayers for you.
The imam from North Smithfield, I believe, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And who we're going to invite in on the program to talk more about what they're dealing with. Make note of that. You know, on the radio yesterday, I got some folks who dialed in and suggested, and even a lot of email too, after you'd appeared and talked much the same way we're talking here. There are some, at least, that are looking for this particular school's representation, or the community of local Islamists, Muslims, to speak to the world affairs of radical extremist behavior, to take opportunities like this to talk about how they condemn that. And I thought it was a pretty deep conversation. I don't know if you heard it.
I heard bits and pieces of it.
Because I said, you know, I don't know. What's your take?
So I think there's two things. Let me just make a global statement first. That is that there are national Muslim groups who make statements after virtually every situation that crops up, like the Copenhagen shootings and so forth. And the problem is those statements don't get picked up. I mean, they issue them. I go looking for them because I'm on the website for some of these so that I can get them. And because people ask me this, I often forward those to folks and say, see, they are saying something. And they do condemn these acts. But it doesn't get picked up. Why, I don't know. I can't answer that. But they do make statements. What we struggle with here, and I think the school struggles with as well, is capacity issues to be able to speak knowledgeably about some of these world events. By the time we get enough information to make a statement that would make sense, we're kind of past the news cycle that it would get picked up. So what we tend to do at the Council of Churches is the National Council of Churches that we work with but are not any formal affiliation with, has the capacity to make statements on these events. So what we generally do is pass forward their statements so people can have an informed statement from a perspective that we would identify with. And then we speak specifically to things like this issue in Rhode Island.
Okay, it's an interesting answer in terms of process. But just in terms of citizen responsibility, I actually took another take and I said, you know, I don't know that I need to hear from the local school clergy and the board at the Islamic School of Rhode Island that they stand against ISIS because they were victims of a random graffiti attack that we hope is limited to just that stupid exercise. Because if you demand that they then become responsible to talk about world affairs, you're making a connectivity. You're forcing a connectivity there that I don't necessarily think is fair. There are arguments on both sides, but it's a very delicate situation.
It is a delicate situation, and you know, for me, and I know Imam Fareed Ansari, who's, as I mentioned earlier, is president of the Council for Muslim Advancement and the president of the Board of Rabbis. The three of us talk all the time. Things come up in the Jewish community, and the question we ask is, do we make a statement about this or don't we? Because sometimes you don't want to draw more attention to a local event. And then there's other times when we feel we have to. For example, several years ago at the Smithfield Congregational Church, someone came up and actually carved a swastika into the wood of the building. And after they had dealt with that, a couple weeks later came back and did it again. In that case, we did say something. And there are other places where we say something. But what I tend to do is if it's an incident with a Jewish community, I talk to the Jewish community and say, do you want us to jump in with you here, or is it better to leave it alone? If they say we want to leave it alone on this one, we honor that. Same thing with the Muslim community. On this, I got a call Sunday afternoon from Imam Ansari talking about what's happening. I said, do you want to make a statement? And they said yes, and we want to make an interfaith statement. And at that point, then, we got busy Sunday afternoon contacting people and helping to set that
But I think that probably is the correct response. At least they can make what you describe as an interfaith statement rather than standing out on their own. Because I don't want a 12-year-old kid who's going to the Islamic School of Providence to have to worry about having to stand up against ISIS when all they're doing is living in town and going to school.
Yeah, I just don't know that that's really the appropriate place. But there are I will tell you.
Or people that represent that kid is what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly. And there are other times when I know Imam Ansari has made statements about some of these world events and condemned this kind of action over and over and over again. And like I said, sometimes it gets picked up, sometimes it doesn't.
I'll tell you what it requires. It requires some serious prayer because there's no doubt that evil is lurking in parts of the world right now. The latest exercise in the beheading of those Egyptian Christians is just, it is completely not digestible.
No, it's beyond our ability to consume.
The world is, these guys have pushed the envelope so far, the world is so shocked that even all of the Middle East is out for them right now. Seems, right?
Yeah, and I mean, when you do that, when they burned that Jordanian soldier alive, a pilot alive, any of these things are reprehensible. And Mufti Ikram said yesterday, our response is that we're praying for you. And that is what we should all do within our own context, within our own tradition. We should be praying for people like this, whatever sadness or evil is in their life or whatever, that somehow it will be expunged and that they will see some sort of light to realize there's no answer here.
Well, some would say that's pacifist. I second the motion. Good to see you.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
One more word. Stay with us. So, coming up tomorrow night, important show, the Education Commissioner, Deborah Gist, on her way out to Oklahoma. She will be here in studio. She's already offered newsmakers some interesting answers to some tough questions, kind of an exit interview, so I hope you'll be here. And I'll see you tomorrow at noontime on the radio, or talk to you at least on WPRO. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.